Hey, my name's Jonathan Hedel, and I make music as Pink Buddha, and welcome to Force Fridays, where we go over tips and tricks for how you can better use the Force. If you've missed the other ones in the series, you can click on the playlist up here to catch the rest of them, and consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on the other ones. So today we're going to go over some ways that I like using the step sequencer and how you can incorporate that into your music making on the Force. Now, if you've watched some of my other videos, you should know that I'm not going to go through this step sequencer and go over every single knob and button and exactly what it does, because I've watched a lot of tutorials that are like that, and frankly, it doesn't help me get down to actually making music. Instead, what I'm going to do is give you some tips and tricks for using the step sequencer in the context of actually making a track, so that what I share with you is very practical and you can apply it immediately. And maybe I should just start off by saying that on the Force, there are way too many ways that you can use the step sequencer. If I push and hold down the step sequencer button on a melodic track, there are 8 different ways you can use this. It's way too many. I pretty much only use the drum, the melodic, and sometimes the lanes. That's it. The mono 8x8, I've tried messing around with it. I literally just don't understand why they put that in there. It feels so unuseful. Same thing goes for the poly 8x8. I also just find that to be completely useless. That said, the other ones are pretty great. So I'm just going to show you today how I use the drum sequencer mode, the melodic sequencer mode, and that's it. So to demonstrate all of this, let's make a track together. I'm going to go to my drum track initially, click on the step sequencer mode and switch to drums. And I find if I'm going to use the step sequencer, it works better to insert a clip first before I start to enter the notes. So I'm going to go to clip and then change this to 4 bars and create a new clip. Little point of explanation here, the pads on the left hand side are my drum pads. Okay. And the ones on the right hand side are the velocity settings. So the dark red is the loudest velocity. So if I want all the notes that I'm entering to be the highest velocity possible, I could click on this one here and it would go in accordingly. This goes from loud all the way down to soft. This blue one means that it's going to be as loud as you hit the pad, which I like in particular because it's an easy way to enter in a number of different notes and start to put some of your expression in right away. I usually like to enter the hi-hat part first, give me a sort of beat to work with, and I don't want to enter all that in by the step sequencer. I feel like it just takes too long. I think there's a faster way if you use the R button, and I'm going to make sure this is set on note repeat, which it is, and at 16th notes. When I hold this down, it's going to play 16th notes. Let's go back to my track here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit record and enter in all the hi-hat notes. Okay, so to get to the second screen, you might have noticed that we see 4 measures up on top, but here we kind of ran out of room. So to get to there, you have to hold down the step sequencer button and then jump back and forth between the 2 pages by these buttons here. It's a little awkward. I really wish that there was just a simple, even just using these arrow keys here to jump back and forth between those pages, but that is what it is. All right, so here are my 16th notes. I might even go through and make sure that I have all of these at a really low volume. Check the velocity, that looks pretty good. I'll come back to the velocity settings in a little bit. Now that we have a hi-hat part laid down, I could come over here and hit the bass drum part and go ahead and click in the bass drum beats that I want to enter, and then click on the snare sound that I want to use. Put those ones in, maybe do them a little bit higher velocity level. Let's see how that works here. Whoops, I was on the wrong page. Gotta go back to page 1. That's why I think that's a little bit awkward here. Let me turn this off and go back to hitting it again. Okay, let's listen to that. Now, I don't really like how that sounds, so I'm going to go in there and erase some of these and start over. Go to the second page here, get rid of my snare drum parts and these bass drum parts. Now, I know I said this already, but I don't really use the step sequencer that much for programming in my beats. I'd rather play them and get the feel of it and then use this for editing. So I'll show you how I normally do that because that last beat sucked. Okay, so with the hi-hat part already down, let's go ahead and enter in the bass and the snare part. I'm going to start recording and then just play them in, and you'll be able to see the notes appear above here. Now I kind of wanted to enter another bass part, so I'm going to pop one in here and see how that sounds. Maybe a little louder. I'm going to add in this other sound here to the snare just to give it a little bit of oomph to it. Alright, so that's a decent beat. I can see the whole clip up above and then scroll through the individual parts. If I click on the bass drum, I can see the bass drum hits for the first 2 measures, any of the snare beats here, hi-hats, etc. And on the second page, if I go to that here, I can see the notes here as well. So hopefully that was helpful to watch. I tend to go back and forth between playing the notes and then looking at them and using this as a way of editing. You could certainly go through and enter all these beats yourself if you like to program them in. This is how you would do so. Let's move on to entering another part, and then I'll come back and edit this a little bit more. All right, now that we got this basic drum part down, let's add some other melodic parts to it. I'm going to go to my matrix view, click on track number 2. I've already loaded on here a sound. Now, I really don't recommend using the melodic step sequencer to enter parts because it is just so excruciatingly slow. If you're going to go to that, you'd have to click on step sequencer, go to the melodic one here. Now the notes are down below. To move that octave up a little bit. I would need to hit the note, click on the one that's here. I didn't have a track in there first, so let me go to launch here and delete this to start with. I'm going to enter a clip and make it just 2 bars, then go back to the step sequencer. I'd have to enter my note and then click up here to trigger the first one. And you can see the notes that I just entered. I suppose this is manageable if you really don't feel comfortable trying to play in the notes, but I just encourage you to try playing it and then go back and correct them. I think it's going to be so much more musical that way than entering in the notes, but this is how you would do that if you were going to enter them in. I'm going to go ahead and just play it, and then we'll go and use the step sequencer as a way of kind of editing and looking at that. All right, so I've already entered the clip, so it's empty right now. I'm going to play along and figure something out. Get this back down to... All right, that's good enough. Let me get that recorded. Now, I made a note in there that I wasn't really happy about, and that's this second one. Let me zoom in here for a second and follow along. I want to delete one of them. Get rid of that note there. Okay, I want to add a little bit more to the second part here. I'm going to hit record again. Now this note here I hit too soft, but I'll come back to editing this in a bit. All right, let's maybe add one more part to this. I'm going to go back to Matrix and go to my third track, which is this pad sound. And play something in for that. Okay, so the step sequencer on that one, I'm not going to use again. Let's do a little bit of editing on this track, and I want to show you something the step sequencer is particularly good for. Now, for as much as I've ripped on the step sequencer for entering in notes, it is really great at adjusting the automation or fine-tuning some of the other details. When I go to the drum track again, I have all my notes here, and I can click on this little button here to pull up the velocity and look at it, but all of them are mixed together. It's not really practical to kind of get in there, and plus it's super small and you have to use your finger on it. I don't really like doing that. What you can do instead is go to Menu and then click where it says Step Sequencer. Now what that brings up is a page that is specifically good at editing some of the event details. And let me show you what I mean here by that. I'm going to take the hi-hat part first. So I'm going to get onto the hi-hat sound I used, and some of these velocity notes were maybe just a little bit louder than I want them to be. I can put these knobs onto screen. If you haven't seen the video I did on knobs, you can click up here and check that out. But if I leave it on screen, it then allows all these knobs down here to adjust the velocity scale here. Now these are for the first 8 steps, so I need to click on the knobs again to do the other 8 steps here. And then that's only one measure, so I can go to this bar view right here, and it's going to scroll through all 4 bars of my drum track. If I'm looking here, I might want to just pull down some of these ones here so that the hi-hat's not quite so loud. Go back to the first couple ones. Maybe I'll pop this one up a little bit louder and then bring down the offbeat hi-hat sounds even more. Switch here to this. So I'm going to bring down this one and go up a little bit more. Bring this down. Let's hear that sounds from the beginning. Oops, I'm in bar number 2. Let's go back to that. It's a little hard to keep track of sometimes where you're at. What I'm trying to do is get the hi-hat notes in between to be a little bit more like a ghost note. So I'm going to turn all these ones down like this. Let's just listen to these first 2 bars so you can hear what I'm talking about. Hi-hat sound is a little bit too loud for me still, so I'm going to go to Menu and click on Pad Mixer so I can adjust the individual pad volumes for my drums. There's my hi-hat sound, and I'm going to turn my hi-hat sound down a little bit more. If I wanted to, I could also insert an effect on that track. I could even put a compressor on there just to help this to be a little bit more flattened out. Okay, let's move on to the other sound, those plucked strings, and we'll go back to the sequencer view here, the step sequencer. Now, using the step sequencer above for melodic parts is a little trickier because it only shows the velocity settings for the note that you happen to be hitting down below. So if you have to find that note first of all, and I think I'm not even in the right octave here, maybe I need to go up. Well, there it is, okay. So this is the right note, and if I wanted to go in and change the velocities there, I don't really use this screen when I'm changing velocities because I can just go into here and edit them when it's really only one note at a time. Where I don't like to use this screen for adjusting things like velocities is for the drums when they're all mixed together. It's harder to get at, but if it was just this situation, I can come in here and adjust it individually. So for example, this one note here is too soft. So I'm going to go to the Select tool and select it, and then press on Velocity and turn that up a little bit more so it's more in line with everything else. Now that we've made the adjustment to the velocity on that one particular note, let's introduce some other fun changes. You go here to the Velocity button and you click on Add New. And this is where you can get into any parameter on this particular track that you want to. I'm going to go actually into the instrument itself by going on the plugin and then finding the cutoff. If I go to the pencil tool, I can draw in a curve for the cutoff. Let's listen how that sounds. And actually, I'm just going to solo this particular track so you can hear specifically what's happening to it. Now, drawing with this pencil tool is rather inexact because you're just using your finger. So one of the things you can do is go back to the step sequencer mode by clicking on Menu and then Step Sequencer. And here are the things I just drew in with that pencil tool. And I can use these knobs to, again, make further adjustments to them if I want to really get in there and fine-tune it. So let's say I wanted the second note to be really quiet. Bam, bam, bam. It's like about right. Where is that one? Here we go. So then you can use the step sequencer here to get in there and really fine tune those knobs, whereas in the clip view, it's a lot harder to get in there and make those specific adjustments here with your fingers. And the fun thing here is you can really add almost anything. So if I wanted to go in here again and add a new part, I can come into this delay, and I think I want to change the delay. Where is that thing? Delay mix. Felt like it was a little bit loud on some of those parts, so let's listen to this again. Especially on those two notes right there, I'm not sure if I like it as much, so I'm going to come in here and put this a little lower, just on those particular parts, bring it up again. Let's go back to the cutoff. If I want to have overall the cutoff be a little higher, that's kind of awkward to do in this clip view. So if I go back in the step sequencer, and you can use this knob here to kind of generally lower them. If you like the curve that you already set, and then you just want to kind of tone it down a little bit, this is a great and easy way to do that. So let's take this off. I just want to go a little bit on those particular notes. All right. Now another way that I could have done this is by going into the track edit, and I could have changed the cutoff here itself. I'm going to be on the screen view, so I can make sure I can change the cutoff here, and then just recorded that live and adjusted it in the step sequencer later. As you might be able to tell, I definitely favor recording things live and then adjusting them later. That might not be your style, so you might like to put in the stuff and adjust it all manually. There's nothing wrong with that. I just prefer to make it as musical as possible, and for me, making it as musical as possible involves playing it and then making corrections later. So if I wanted to adjust the cutoff and do that, I would simply hit record and then move the cutoff button here. So now I have new automation for the cutoff on this track based upon the adjustments that I just made. And again, I could come in here and adjust this if I wanted to by going back in the step sequencer and going to the cutoff and adjusting this if I want to move it up a little bit. Just a tad. Be not quite so muffled. The step sequencer has this presets that has some patterns drawn there. You have to put them in first. So if I draw them in all the way like this, and just to give me something to work with. I could have done this over in the clip one as well, or recorded it live. There we go. All 8 bars, come back to the beginning. Now, this one here, if I put it in, it starts to draw in some shapes already. And let's just do this one to start with. Then you got to go to the next bar, put that in again. But what I don't like about this is every time you switch to a new bar and you push this again, it rotates between all of them. So you have to kind of go back and hit it again if you really want to have something to be similar. Let's listen to how this sounds. Okay, mixed in with everything else. I don't really like how that sounds, but they have other patterns here that we could do. Maybe something, I didn't mind the first one as much. Maybe the second one will change it to this. I hope that you're noticing that this is a little awkward and slow for programming in automation if you're doing that entirely from scratch. I would again recommend going to the individual track, and I could get there by doing track edit, change the knob to track so that I can see where's my cutoff on this. There it is. Okay. Go back to my clip so I can watch it, and then just hit record. Okay, now I have a curve that's drawn in there. See how fast that was? It's just easier if you record it live. If you don't like it, then go in and make some adjustments. Like we said before, if it was a little too low, I could come in here to the step sequencer and adjust the automation amount for the cutoff on these individual bars. Something that's pretty fun for the drums. It definitely starts to get a little extreme, but if you go in here and you click on this section right here, and I go to add something new and actually go to the track itself, I can change the tuning for that and then go ahead and draw in some different tuning and check how weird this can end up sounding. I'm going to highlight the drums. If you were going to do something like this, I would definitely go into the step sequencer mode and make some fine-tuned adjustments to that, because that was pretty crude. Because you'd be able to go to that individual track, I have to click on knobs here to get back to the screen, but it gives me the actual adjustments. I can see the numbers here, so if I wanted it to be a whole step lower initially on that first bass drum, I could adjust that in a very fine-tuned degree. These ones are way too low. I can either just draw them in a little higher. It's not very precise, although I can see the number up there. I could click on the other knobs and then just simply adjust these like this, like so. It's kind of fun if you really wanted to make them really extreme. You could do so like this. You can get a little crazy with that. You might be starting to recognize that you can go really deep with this, and you can even take it a step further in that you can adjust things for individual pads. There's a little pad number up above here, and when I play these different notes, it changes. And so if you want to go in and affect, maybe put something for particular pad layer, I can go into pad number A7 and change any of these particular parameters for just this pad and then put those notes in there. So let's say I did the filter cutoff just for this pad, and you can also adjust that in the clip view here. So if I click on velocity and then go to the pad filter cutoff, it's going to be specifically just for this pad. And this viewpoint here isn't really great for jumping around in it. So when you're adjusting the individual event layers like that, I usually jump between the step sequencer when I want to maybe just do the pad and come to the cutoff for that one if I want to get really specific. But the limitation is you can only see one bar at a time, whereas the clip view, You can see your whole phrase by zooming in and out. You can certainly zoom in closer if you want to, but if you happen to have a 16-bar phrase, you could look at the entire shape, and that's a limitation I see to the step sequencer, is you don't get the chance to do that. So I hope this has been helpful for you in seeing how you can use the step sequencer in a very practical way. I certainly could have gone through and just shown you what each button did, but a lot of the functionality for the step sequencer I think is pretty useless, especially all these other different viewpoints that you can get into. So the ones I tried to show you were the most important ones that impact how I actually make music. Feel free to share in the comments if you have some other tips and tricks that you tend to use that you can share with the group. And if you found this to be helpful, consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button.